Okay, so again, that's all the stuff basically on 4 to 6. There's really nothing else in this section. And if you're following along okay yesterday, this is just a function, so it goes by most of the same function rules. Okay, and actually almost all the same function rules, but it acts just a little bit different. So yesterday, right, we talked about, where do you want to look? Right, yesterday we talked about A being the amplitude. Okay, so when you're doing sine and cosine, like if you treat those as like the parent function, does that make sense? Parent function? Okay, so if we're treating those as the parent function, then the amplitude is 1. And just think of the unit circle, right? Like the biggest value you can get is 1, the smallest value would be -1. And so then they go up and down between those two, and they hit all those unit circle plus everything in between. Okay, so just like any other function, if we multiply on the outside, it's a little bit different, I guess. But if you think about multiplying on the outside of an old function, we talked about kind of like grabbing a parabola and pulling it. And so that made it a vertical stretch. Okay, so same idea here. And so I'm going to jump, once I get done talking, I'm going to do some examples and I'll show you kind of like what I'm talking about. Okay, so the same kind of thing. So if A was 3, then instead of going from 1 to -1, 3 to -3, but nothing else changes. Like we should look at this as we go. The people getting recorded, I apologize, you're not going to see this part. Okay. All right, so then, again, the period is, again, just like how long does it take to repeat? Okay, and so, let me say this first, right? The vertical shift is the same as it always was, right? If we add something on the outside, D, then it's shifting it up. And if we subtract it, it's shifting it down. Okay, so that one's kind of boring because, it's just shifting up and down. That's the same as what it's always been, all year. Okay, so then, and again, the absolute value implies that if it's -3, then you still count the amplitude 3 because it's really just the distance that's traveling. Okay, so the negative, remember, would just flip everything over the x-axis. Okay, so the amplitude is just the absolute value of that. You don't do a negative amplitude. All right, so then the period, again, is how long it takes going down the x-axis to start repeating. And so what you can do is take whatever it's being multiplied by. Again, sine and cosine are basically the same function. So this applies to both of them. You need it. Yeah. Give me 1 second. Let me get her going here. No. All right. So anyway, what affects the period is if you multiply on the inside. Okay, so then you can find the period by just taking that number and dividing it 2 pi by it. Now, the question is, why are we dividing 2 pi by that number? Because that's normally 1. So we're going to break it down into maybe more. Okay, so then let's take a look at the difference between those. Oops. The other thing that we're looking at is shifting it. And so there's 2 things that are going on. Okay, so if you just want to look at a horizontal shift, left or right, if B up here is 1, then it's just like it is in any other function, where you move left and right opposite of the sign, however far that says. Okay, so we'll look at a couple of those. All right, but if there is a B involved, not only does that mess with the period, but then it also messes with the horizontal shift. And so then actually the horizontal shift would be C over B.
B is inside the parentheses.
B is inside the parentheses, yeah. Okay, so now maybe that's a little confusing. So then what you can do, it depends on what the question is asking or what you need to think of. You can also just take that inside, solve one equation where you set it equal to 0. The reason being is that's where your normal starting spot is. And you solve that for x and it'll tell you where your new starting spot is. And that's what I'm trying to say with all this. Okay, and then you set that same thing equal to 2 pi. Okay, and then it's going to, when you solve for x, it will tell you when it ends. Okay, so then you'd have to, so if we shrunk it up to pi over 2, the period, right, by doing these shifts, so then the whole thing would have to be complete by the time it gets to pi over 2.
So if you put in, how would you put that into that equation?
All right, so yeah, let's play around with it for a second.
See how total waves the exact same way. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it just happened.
Yeah. And that's how you make $1 million. All right, let's go on. All right, so then I'm on page 410 here. And so I'll do a couple with you guys. I don't think it's you're probably not gonna need a whole bunch.
It's funny, so like, you just pop back on, like, never do this and that.
Yeah.
Alright, let's continue now.
Yeah. And that's the only reason I'll punch you in the face. All right, let's go on.
It
Right.
should have been like, and that's how you make, like two numbers that don't equal each other, just
Yeah.
really confusing.
Like, and that's 2 plus 2 equals 5.
Yeah.
Alright, let's continue.
Or even better. And that's how you can get 100% on the fourth quarter. Okay. So, wait a minute. What? All right. So, from 1 to 13 odd, I'm just going to do this even one. They gave you a picture on the graph. Oh, and just as a side note, there are some different versions of the book. I don't know when it happens. I think maybe it happens in this section where you don't have the same graph that I do, but half of you do and half of you don't. So, like if there's ever a time that you're like, what in the heck are you talking about? That's not what I'm looking at. Just say something, because some of the books get like printed differently. So all we're doing on this one is amplitude, and this is on 410. So amplitude and period. Okay, so what is the amplitude of this one? 2. And again, what does that mean?
That it's going from positive 2 to negative 2.
Yeah. How much?
Stretched it, yeah, stretched it, right? Okay, and then the period, right? Remember, we're just doing 2 pi over 3. You can't reduce that. So then what does the period mean again?
How often it, like, goes back. Yeah.
How long does it take for it to get back to the beginning, or start repeating, or however you want to do it? And so if you look at the picture they have there, right? So they're doing cosine. So the period begins there at 0, 2. And then, you follow it along and you can see that it doesn't quite get to pi. And if I said, well, can we accept that looks like 2/3 of pi? I think you can agree with that. That looks about like 2/3, okay? Is that okay? All right, so should we do another one of those, or?
Yeah.
All right, so then how about we do 12? Oh, and I do have your quizzes. I gotta give those back to you.
Yeah. I got something wrong. I don't know what it is.
I'll give it back to you.
So I'm going to do a test question on one of my quizzes real quick so I can get 0.13%. If I get 0.13%, I get to an A.
Well, can we do this first?
Yeah.
All right, what's the amplitude here?
5 over 2.
And so what does that mean again?
It's
How
going
much
to
is
go
like,
from
it's going to hit
2 and a
5
half
over 2 and
to
it's going to get it down to
negative
negative
2
5
and a
over
half.
2.
Okay. And then the period, you're doing 2 pi divided by,
That's over 4.
so just 1 over 4.
Just be.
So then the period is 8 pi. And so then, right, go ahead. Well, so then it's really,
Slow.
yeah, really slow coming back up, right? It has to go, instead of 2 pi, it's 4 times as long to get all the way up, right?
But it's still the same amplitude, correct?
Yes.
So yeah,
Even though it takes that long, it's still only reaching a certain point.
well, so it's going up to 2.5 in this case.
Yeah.
But it really takes a long time. So yeah.
Takes a while.
So then our original one should go have 4 periods by the time this one does 1 period. Okay. All right. So then we're looking up here at 16, and so we've done this several times, right? You guys got graphing calculators. I suggest that you use them, set them up so that you can look at things properly, like we did yesterday or whenever it was, right? Where you change your scale. And change how it's counting so that it makes sense to what we're looking at. I would just do pi over 2. I think that's the easiest one, but you can do pi over 4 if you want. And so then the way I would do these is, what do you think it's going to do? And then make sure that that's what it's doing. And if it's not doing that, see if you can figure out why. So like if I'm looking at 16, so what's the difference from F to G there?
You rotate to the left by pi.
Yeah, so you shift left pi units.
I think that would, I think 16 would, the G would go back into sine.
And so then it probably goes back into sine. I think it's pi over 2 though.
If you're, to the right is pi over 2, to the left I thought was pi, because we tried.
Well, so then, no, because like, it would be like negative, it would be negative cosine, right? So we shifted,
Oh, yeah.
right, I think, unless I'm thinking backwards, I might be thinking backwards though. There, we can just find out, right?
Yeah. Because we went to the.
So then, what about 18? What's the difference between 18 and, oh God, the negative on the inside? Because that's usually a horizontal reflection. So cosine, right? So if you're looking at cosine over there on the board, if we did, oh no, we're doing sine here. So we look at sine on the board. Right, and we did 3 sine, it would, or sine, I'm doing this backward. So then our period would be faster, right? And then the negative 3 over the y-axis. So I'm thinking that would be the same as, I don't want to mess you guys up.
What did you say it was again?
So then, because we're doing 3, and so our guess, yeah, I have no idea what they're going to listen to. 23, what's you start with the light gray one, you go to the black one. What's changed?
If the amplitude is 2 instead of 1.
Yeah, in fact, you can tell, yeah, it's 2 instead of 1. All right, what about 24? What happened there? Light gray to the dark, to the black.
They shrunk the period.
Yeah.
It's
The period
value of
of
the x is
pi
smaller.
instead of in pi.
Yeah, so basically the period changed, right?
Yeah.
And so we multiplied it by a number bigger than 1. How about that? Because it shrunk it up, made it quicker, right? However you want to describe it. What about 25? What's that one? Just a shift to the, well, I guess you could, argue both either way, right? Probably from left to right though, because that's an easier shift.
I think the next one's a little hard to argue.
26?
Yeah.
Just a shift up, yeah. Okay, all right, so we're all good?